welcome to our new podcast, Get Hydrated, sponsored by Hydra BPM, an AI-driven healthcare software for optimizing patient flow. I am your host, Brandon Plafka, the founder of Hydra BPM. And you know, when I decided to launch a podcast, the first question I asked myself was, how can we do something different and interesting? And I really wanted to do something that supported our company vision. And I think you'll find that we've answered the first part in our planned format with the guests we have coming up. The second part, quite frankly, is just going to be answered by the audience over time. Are we interesting? Get Hydrated is about the people of healthcare telling their stories. Guests will range anywhere from family members who have taken care of loved ones, individuals with careers in healthcare, leaders who have inspired us. Each one really having a firsthand perspective to the pros and cons of our healthcare system. That's really key in what we're trying to accomplish here. We want to give a platform to some of the individuals who may not otherwise get an opportunity to talk about their experiences, both the good and the bad of what we experience in our healthcare system. So, the reality is that likely many of the names of our guests you won't recognize before the episode, but our goal is that you won't forget them after. Give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been in healthcare business development and operations leadership for going on 15 years, across multiple segments. I've kind of previously described myself as an IQ empath. I think through the episodes, you'll find me to be analytical, probably using some logic frequently, but at the same time, being able to empathize with the emotions of your greatest successes and failures of our guests. As I said, previously mentioned that I'm the founder of Hydra BPM, and I promise this isn't going to become a commercial for Hydra, but I think it's the perspective is important for the credibility and the purpose of the podcast. When I was developing and launching the concept of Hydra, I did it because I witnessed the same challenges that myself and my team were facing around administrative workflow, patient workflow, and scheduling. And I knew that whatever we built was going to have to be simple, couldn't add a lot of administrative burden to the workflow and the day of an individual, but at the same time, it needed to be effective. And our objective with the software is minimizing delays and maximizing care. And we do that by optimizing the patient workflow and healthcare operations by transforming data analytics into decisive action. So with many of the complex solutions that are out there, the complex paperwork, we really wanted to give healthcare organizations a simple business intelligence tool that worked, quite frankly. And the current Hydra artificial intelligence engine is actually just the first of a future products to deliver on our company vision, which is for innovative concepts and intuitive software. So that's enough about the commercial for Hydra. That will get shorter as future episodes go on. Now I'd like to get to the really exciting and fun stuff and begin to introduce our first guest on our first Get Hydrated episode. Our first guest actually breaks from the mold a little bit from the guests I previously described by not having a direct connection to healthcare, although his wife is a soon-to-be nurse practitioner, and he's actually an investor in Hydra. His name is Sean Armstrong. So welcome, Sean.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background about Sean. Sean grew up in Indianapolis. I've actually known Sean for quite some time. He graduated from Indiana State, and following graduation, he actually went on to build a rather successful commercial painting company. The success within his company, Inline Painting, has allowed him to start investing in other businesses, which is what brought us here today, and the realization of Hydra. It was a funny story real quick. Sean and I last week were actually just talking about investment risk, and he made a offhanded comment to me that I was his Uber. And I assured him that would come without the arrogance and irresponsibility of their former CEO. So once again, thanks for joining us here, Sean. I appreciate your time.
That Uber comment definitely never gets old. So.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. First question I have for you, Sean, is thinking back, Why did you start inline painting?
I started inline painting. I would say it goes back to, of course, wanting to be an entrepreneur, but I would say it goes back to the early days of my mother owning her own business, and of course my father being VP of another commercial paint company when I was young, and just seeing the success of the owner of that company and the things, and at that time, of course, being young, it's the things that he had, and then that's kind of the focus at that point in that age, because you don't know any better. But it's just wanting to be an entrepreneur. So when I had the opportunity, and I got the phone call from my father, and he was pretty much, do you want to team up and do this? Because I've been trying to get him to do it for years, because he was doing it for so many other people, and finally he took the opportunity, and he included me in on that opportunity. So that's kind of where inline painting came from.
Got it. I like it. You said one thing there that I've thought was quite interesting, because I do know you. I get to cheat a little bit to know the reality of who you are today. But you brought up I think a really important point there is you said when you were younger, you saw the stuff.
Yeah.
So given that, obviously I think that perspective changes a little bit. So can you give us some insight onto what you mean by that? When you were younger, it was about the stuff. What is it about for you today?
Today it's now that we've grown to where we're at. It's now more of the purpose, and it's not necessarily about the money. I mean, end of the day, of course, revenue is what pushes a business, but it's now to the point to where I want to see others succeed as far as within my business. I mean, I enjoy bringing people on and seeing them grow, and actually, helping them grow, and hopefully getting them to higher levels within their career. And yeah, I would say that's pretty much where it comes from.
What is it that intrigues you about being an entrepreneur? You've referenced that a couple of times, that early on, that was a lot of the driving force behind it. You witnessed your mother as an entrepreneur. What is it that's intriguing about being an entrepreneur for you? Because, a lot of people, fear that. I mean, just dreadfully fear the idea of living in that entrepreneurial state. Why do you think it's something that actually is quite the opposite for you and intriguing?
I would say it's, in the beginning, of course, it was the idea of building something and growing it. And at that point, when we did start, and being young when I did start it, I kind of thought there was going to be a little bit more, maybe freedom of doing more things of what I want to do day to day. But I have slowly learned that it isn't that way. So it's really the larger that you get and the more successful that your company becomes, the harder you got to work and the more time that you really need to put in. So yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's a lot of irony in that statement, and that to your point, I think a lot of people want to be an entrepreneur because of that freedom, that flexibility, but oftentimes it's also that freedom and flexibility that causes them to fail, right? It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Definitely.
With the remainder of our time today, I really want to make sure that we really give the audience really two things. I want to gain some insight from you about the successes of your business, and why do you think you've had those successes? And then, as we move to the later stages of the questions, we'll talk a little bit more about, how those successes have afforded your we'll call it foray into investing and the relationship with Hydra. So just kind of wanted to set that foundation for our audience about what to do or what to expect over these next few questions. But, looking back now from your starting point to what you've learned over what you've been doing this going on 10, 15 years, when Inline actually start?
It was pretty much August 07. So
okay. 11 years.
recession. So
yeah, right up 11 years here now. So looking back, what is your advice for anybody thinking about starting a business, whether it's, as, certainly in the commercial space and in something that's something like painting that's more of a blue collar industry, or, I think as you and I have discussed, the concepts of business a lot of times remain the same. So do you have some just general thoughts about what you would say to somebody who's looking to start a business?
I do. I'd say probably one of the main things that I always focus on and like to tell others when they do ask me, any questions about owning my own business is one thing that they have to remember is, because a lot of people, they think when they start their own company that they're going to be successful and just have all types of income and so forth in the beginning. And what they do is they actually spend a lot of the money that they end up receiving in the beginning of the business, and instead of reinvesting immediately for years, or just a few years, they think they can just draw the money out immediately. And that's one of the things that I feel that why we've been successful as a company is everything we've pretty much made, we either put back into the company or invested into other things, other industries or other companies. So I would say put back in. So when you do start a business, don't think it's going to take you a year, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, we're now at 11 years at it, and I would say probably for 7 years of that, I would say we reinvested into our company for those 7 years before we really actually started paying ourselves any type of income that was, enough to survive on. So.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. And what would you say you spent the majority of that, of that 7 years that you're reinvesting? Where were you reinvesting at? Was there a specific area of the business that you were reinvesting in?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much, it was capital for payroll. I mean, that was the main thing. That was the toughest part. I mean, within our industry, I would say your labor is 60% of your expenses for your total business. So it's having those payrolls for having, 30 plus employees, at that time. So that's the main struggle. The suppliers, at that point, they want to partner with you. So with having those type of the wonderful suppliers that we have had, they allow you to take your monthly payments out to a certain extent and allow you to be able to kind of finance that part of it. So the labor, that's the main part we pretty much put back in.
Okay. Yeah, I think, to that point, you got a very, niche business in the sense you're in a, commercial painting. But the reality is that same critical operating expense around payroll is the same in many other businesses. So I think for anybody who's listening, there's something to be taken from that, no matter what industry you're in, or no matter what kind of business you're looking to start. Your people are obviously going to be your highest capital or your operating expense. So certainly something to be said for that. Looking back again on that 11 years, Sean, what do you think has contributed really to the success in building Inline? Obviously, one of those probably is your financial discipline, but are there other things that you would highlight?
Yeah, my father being my business partner, of course, myself, our work ethic is exactly the same. So we're the type that, we get up at 4 a.m. and, we start our day routines and, we're, especially in the early stages, at the office by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes even, literally getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning and being there by 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and working, 16 to 18 hours, if not 20 hours a day. I remember within the first I'd probably say 4 years of our company that we did that. And it wasn't just 5 days a week. I mean, we were working 7 days a week. So I think it was the work ethic. It's really gotten us to where we're at now. Um, it's just one of those things that I'm just a firm believer on still. I think it's always, to me, it's the harder you work and the more time that you put in at it, I think the more success comes out of whatever the time you're putting that in.
Sure. Yeah. And what were some of those things early on that you were spending that time on? What was real critical to building that foundation at that stage?
At that point in the early stages, it was, I would say, putting our feet to the concrete, I guess, is kind of one of the things we used to always use and say. But it was even just going to our clientele or our, general contractors or business owners or building owners and just getting our name out there. I mean, my father's always had a large, a pretty well-known name within the industry. So that helped, but we just had to get our name out there and let them know how serious about, what we were doing. So that was the main thing I say, and during the day, but the evening hours, working late was usually paperwork, because you didn't have time for it during the day because you're trying to build the business as everybody why everybody's at their office, and then staying late in the evenings to finish up, payroll, taxes, just day-to-day daily entries into each project. So, because you gotta understand the beginning days, I mean, we pretty much there was just three of us at that point. So four of us, I guess, with one of our other estimators that was really highly involved, or still highly involved, and it just doing that paperwork, I think, having the time for it.
Yeah, and something I want to highlight that you said there, Sean, that for, again, anybody who's listening, thinking about, how do they manage their day? If they're starting a business, how do they, manage their time and the effort is, it's very important to understand how you're using your time. And to your point about, there were some days it was 16 hours, 18 hours. Well, if in the course of 16 hours, you spent your core business hours focused on paperwork, and then got to 5 o'clock and thought, oh shit, I need to do sales. And now everybody's gone and home. You've kind of lost your day. So I like that you really focused there and talked about thinking about you're using that time wisely. So it's not just about the amount of hours. You got to make sure you understand that what I would often say is, are they revenue generating opportunities or are they revenue generating tasks? And those revenue generating tasks need to be done in those prime hours. Sometimes if you're getting very specific, you can look at it as, 9 to 11 in the morning because people are in their office, they're not off to lunch, or they're not trying to get settled in early in the day. But it's certainly, at the very least, it's occurring somewhere between the 8 to 5 hours. You're not trying to do your follow-up and your sales calls at night, right? When you're trying to figure out your day. So I thought that was a really critical piece there to highlight, again, that people need to think about when they're starting their business, is making sure they're putting the effort in the right parts of the day as well. So
yeah, it's definitely all about priority and time management. I mean, that I highly believe in those.
Yeah, and so you kind of that question segues a little bit to this one, but I think there may be a small differentiation here. Is that as you look back on the business and some of those challenges that you had early on, right, which were really just time, right, just putting in the work and the effort and building a bit of a name and a reputation for yourself. How are those challenges today different than the challenges you faced early on? Because for anybody, again, who's listening, I'm talking to the audience, is please understand that you're running a multi-million-dollar business. The challenges don't go away. They just look different. So Could you speak on that?
I'd say the biggest challenge that we faced when we first started Inline would be developing relationships and to keep receiving projects to keep the revenue coming in. once you build that, I guess you would say our brand, as we have within our market, the projects aren't the issue at that point. Now, as far as the major problem that we have is having the proper employees to get the projects done. When you have only 15 to 20, or let's say 15 employees in the beginning, as we started within our field, it was pretty much easy to get those projects done at that point. But now, having twice the projects and twice the yearly revenue, you have to have twice the employees to be able to complete those projects. So employees, I would say at this point, is the hardest thing. And it's not, you can receive employees, but you need people that are experienced with what we do. Everybody always says, I'm a painter, but end of the day, it's different from painting your mother's, white picket fence. There's a strategy and a way to tackle our projects, and it's just finding those people to be able to do that. That's what's tough.
Right. Yeah, I can't help, Sean, but recognize that, obviously as I've said, my background is in healthcare, and you're talking about an industry very different, but right away, I quickly realized that some of the core concepts about what we're talking about are one and the same, which is building a successful business is oftentimes about the people and the talent and finding the place for them. So, there's the core concepts across multiple industries always seem to come to light. So I think that's really important for everybody to understand is no matter what organization you're in, even within healthcare, right? We obviously are representing a healthcare industry and market here on the podcast. Is whether you're in a hospital setting or maybe a walk-in clinic setting, heck, insurance, whatever it may be, that real success often comes with hiring great people and then having good leaders around them to show them the way. So you realize that the principles of business obviously aren't very different. And I know that's not real earth-shattering stuff there, but I just think it's interesting to see that you obviously come from an industry that is on paper very different than healthcare, but yet we're still here talking about the same things that we'd be talking about if we were hosting a commercial painting podcast.
Right.
So now, Sean, it's 2018. You know what 2011 Sean experienced. You're obviously living in the moment of 2018 Sean. What would 2018 Sean say to the Sean who started Inline painting?
The main thing I would say is be patient. That's one thing that I don't have, and I expect everything to happen tomorrow, and I can't even realize where we are at now compared to where we were at in 2007. But I thought it would happen, even a lot sooner, because everybody always said, or anything that I've ever read, the books that I've read or anything like that, they'd always said 3 to 5 years, successful company, But, when we started Inline, it was, during, the recession. So with that being said, it took a little bit longer. So patience definitely wore thin at times. So, but I stuck through it. So, and then here we are. So patience, that's what I would say. Be patient.
Yeah. Something that can, be very difficult to do when you're eating breadcrumbs at times, right? Early on. So
yeah, it was definitely rough in the beginning. So I can say that.
Yeah. What do you think was the driver that, it sounds like in the last few years, this has become more of a reality. And then of course, obviously, our working relationship, we know that it's a reality, but what was the driver that led you to start investing in other businesses? Especially, I know you do some that's very closely connected to your current industry, but Hydra obviously is, completely outside of it. So, what was the driving force there?
So the driving force was for what we ended up going into next was the pretty much commercial real estate. That's what we went into, and we knew we had cheap labor costs because of having those employees already. And a lot of people win, just for instance, all the flipping shows that you see on, all the home networks and all that, they hire people. So immediately we were working with a lot of people that own multi-unit facilities, and we were painting them for them, and they were telling us, their history and their path and how they got where they're at. So, my business partner, my father, and I decided, well, they can do it, we can do it. So we decided to invest into commercial real estate. So, we bought commercial buildings and, revamped them more or less, and bought multi-unit facilities, did the same thing. And it's just kind of grown from there. So it was something easy and that we were already kind of ground to and attached to. So we knew it would be easy for us, and that's what we did. And it grew from there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. And, I'll add that from knowing Sean, I can say, to our audience that one thing that I think attributes to what he, is saying that made just a lot of sense on paper because it was a closely tied industry. One thing that probably is innately wired within Sean that I think is critical is that he certainly takes the time to ask questions and is just, curious as well as willing to learn. So when he says that he, would talk to the multi-unit, either, property owners and or managers or understanding where they came from, it was that thirst for more knowledge that really, I think probably, maybe Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly at the very least built some confidence in understanding that transition could be easy, right? And that there is an easy connection there. So, it's kudos to you in a lot of ways. And what we've been going through together and building Hydra is, the learning process for both of us in that. So I think it speaks true both in your early investments into something that was closely related to your business, but also now again, as you have quote unquote been introduced to the startup world, which may be a little different than the traditional business model. Again, as you and I have had a few laughs about along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, Sean, really that's about all the time we have here. Is there any final questions or thoughts that you'd like to close with?
Yeah, actually I would like to, if at all possible, Brandon, I'd like to, even if anybody from Inline is actually listening, I would like to even tell them, thank you for, giving, allowing and working together with Inline and myself and my father and making all this happen. If it wasn't, for all our staff, we wouldn't be where we're at today. And I can't thank them enough.
All right. Well, you have it there, folks. That's directly from the owner of Inline Painting himself, directly thanking his employees and understanding the value that they bring to the table. For us, and as far as our channel is concerned here, Get Hydrated, we can call that first episode a wrap. Probably called a little bumpy too along the way, but it's important to know that the reason Sean was on today is because we want our audience to connect with our company and what we're trying to do. It's not lost on the two of us that that probably didn't feel insanely tied to healthcare. But there is still things to be learned from there, and that in an entirely different industry, we're still talking about the same business principles. So, please take from that as you will. But again, although we weren't necessarily talking heavily about healthcare. It was important for me, and I think the credibility and the purpose of our company and this channel, to have somebody on who is an investor and closely connected not only to me, but the business as well. And that actually will be the same story for a couple of future guests along the way, that you're going to meet others that are involved in the business too. So again, thank you all for listening. We look forward to seeing you again. You can expect to see new episodes each week on Wednesdays. So thank you, and we'll be in touch soon.